Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about the process of bore sighting your rifle scope to your rifle. This is the first process that we recommend everybody goes through whenever they're switching up something about their setup. Maybe it's a new rifle, a new scope, or both a new rifle and new scope being mated together. It's a really great way to go about things before you go sending rounds downrange. We're going to ensure that those first rounds end up in a spot that we can make easy corrections from, or depending on where we're shooting, also just end up in a place that's safe and where we want the rounds to go. Bore sighting your scope to your rifle doesn't have to be difficult or particularly resource intensive. Here we just have the rifle with the scope mounted up on top and no additional pieces of equipment. Some people will use other pieces of equipment like a laser shining down the barrel, or they'll put devices on the end of their barrel, for example, and that's all fine, but we found that you can oftentimes get just as good, if not better results using your own eye, pulling out the bolt, looking down the barrel, and matching up what you're seeing through the scope with what you're seeing through the bore. And that works for a lot of different rifle platforms. Bolt action rifles are generally very easy, as are AR-15s, where you can separate the receiver and pull out the bolt carrier group and just look down the barrel that way. There are some rifle platforms where you may have to resort to something like a laser or a device on the end of the barrel because they don't allow you to see through the back of the receiver and down the barrel in order to do that bore sight process. One off the top of my head would be like an AK-47. If you don't have that piece of equipment and you're in that camp, don't worry. You can also just start up a lot closer to the target and ease your way back as you make adjustments. But anyway, we're just going to go into the process with this bolt action rifle, looking down the barrel, and then matching up our scope. So the setup here, first and foremost, like I said, we're going to remove the bolt. And depending on your rifle, the process of doing that may vary, so just consult your manual if you're not exactly sure how it's done. Once the bolt's removed, I'm also going to make sure that any caps over my turrets are removed because we just don't want to have to do that later on once we get the rifle steady and in the exact place that we want it to be. And then we're just going to use any form of a base that's nice and sturdy. In this case, I've got a bunch of bags and stuff, but you could use a bipod with a bag at the rear. You could use a series of backpacks. Heck, you can use a bunch of toilet paper rolls if you really feel like it. It, again, doesn't have to be particularly resource intensive. So with this being said, we have a target downrange at 100 yards. That's the distance that we're going to ultimately zero at. So we're going to bore sight at that distance, and everything is ready to go. So I'm just going to start looking down the barrel to get my barrel, the center of it, pointed right at the center of that target. It's nice. Down there we have a high contrast target, which is just a big white piece of steel. And it actually, somebody came out here before and punched a nice impact right in the center of that steel, so we have a dark spot right in the middle of that white target. That's what I'm going to try and put right in the center of this bore. Another thing that we're going to mention for the setup here is that if you have a scope with an adjustable parallax knob, whether it be on the side or an adjustable objective up front on the scope, just make sure you have it set to the distance that you're bore sighting at, in this case, 100 yards. If we had it set to a distance that was pretty far off of that amount, then as we were going up and trying to look through the scope, we're going to be inducing some parallax error unless our eye is directly in line with the optical system, which can mess with the end result. Now, when you're looking down the barrel of the rifle, it's important to remember to keep your eye right in the center of that bore because depending on the caliber of your rifle, you might be looking down a larger bore. And really, even despite that, depending on where your eye is, it can actually change where it appears the barrel is pointing. If we're right in the center, then we're going to get the best idea of where the round is ultimately going to end up. All right, I have the barrel pointing right at the center of the target downrange. Now I'm going to look through my scope and see where my reticle is pointing. We just put this scope on top of this rifle. This particular setup has never been shot before, so I can see now that the reticle, even though the center of the barrel is pointed right at the center of that steel target, I can see that the reticle is all the way down on the lower left corner of the steel. So I'm going to have to move that reticle up and to the left. Now, if you go up to your turrets, you're going to see that the elevation is going to have an up and a down indication. Also, the windage turret is going to have a right and a left indication as to what way you need to turn that turret in order to go up or down. Keep in mind, though, bore sighting is where people get a little bit confused sometimes because that up and down or left and right correlates to changing the bullet's point of impact on the target. It actually doesn't correlate to the direct reticle's movement. So when I dial in the up direction, the reticle is actually physically going to move down. and vice versa for all of the different directions around here. Same goes for left and right on the windage turret as well. So if you're noticing that it seems like it's moving opposite, just be aware that's only during the bore sighting process that it's going to seem a little bit opposite. Once you actually get shooting, it'll make sense. We're moving the bullet's point of impact. So in this case, to move up, I'm actually going to move the elevation turret in the downward direction. And in order to move left, I'm going to move the turret in the right direction for the windage. All right, so looking down the barrel, I can see that the gun really didn't move despite my adjustments to the rifle scope up top and the turrets. I can see also that the center of my reticle is pointing right about where I feel best that the barrel is pointed. So at this point in time, I know that at least my first shot is going to be a lot closer to hitting the center of the target than I would have had I not made any adjustments at all. If I wouldn't have made any adjustments at all, I could see right off the bat, I would have been hitting the berm behind the target, which again, like we said before too, is just more difficult to make a correction off of. All right, so our first shot went down range, and instead of being way down in the dirt somewhere, we actually got it on the steel target. Now, ideally, if we're going to do the full sight-in process, we do it on paper and we'd shoot groups and whatnot, but this is more just for experimentation purposes. So now we could go into our scope. I was aiming for the center impact from somebody's previous range trip there on the target, and I can actually use the hash marks in my reticle to determine how much there I am low and to the left a little bit, and make a few adjustments and see if we get a little bit closer. All right, now for a full sight-in procedure, we have a video on that. Again, that's where we're going to be using paper, shooting some groups. But as you can see, in just a couple of shots here, we were able to get rounds on steel, thanks to our bore sight, and then get really, really dang close to where we're wanting to hit ultimately. So if you guys have any questions about this procedure in particular or anything else, rifle scope, optics, shooting related, let us know. You can hit us up in the comments below to this video. You can also hit us up via phone, email, social media, whatever works best for you. We love hearing from you guys. Thanks for watching these videos. We'll see you on the next one.